The morning everything Changed's crystal serving tray slipped from Zeph's pale green fingers and shattered against the kitchen floor like a gunshot in the morning silence. Detective Jake Morrison froze with his coffee mug halfway to his lips, watching his household servant stare at the family photograph on the counter with the intensity of someone solving a murder case. The woman he'd known for 6 months as quiet, obedient Zeph suddenly looked anything but submissive. "That's an interesting reaction to a picture," Jake said, setting down his mug with deliberate calm. His detective instincts kicked in as he studied her face, noting the way her violet eyes had widened and her breathing had quickened. The photograph showed his late brother Tommy in his military uniform, smiling that cocky grin that had gotten him into trouble more times than Jake could count. Zeph didn't respond immediately. Instead, she knelt to gather the crystal fragments, her movements suddenly graceful in a way that seemed almost predatory. When she finally looked up, her voice carried an accent he'd never heard before. "Despite living with her for half a year, Thomas Morrison," she whispered, and the name fell from her lips like a prayer in a language that shouldn't exist. "He saved my world." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Tommy had died 3 years ago in what the military called a classified training accident. No details, no explanations, just a flag and condolences from officials who wouldn't meet his eyes. Jake had spent months trying to dig deeper, using every contact in law enforcement. But the walls around his brother's death were built of classified steel and national security concrete. "How do you know that name?" His voice came out rougher than intended, the grief he thought he'd buried rising to the surface like oil on water. Zeph rose from the floor, the broken crystal cupped in her palms. As Jake watched in fascination and growing alarm, the fragments began to glow with soft blue light, melting and reforming into a perfect sphere. The impossible display of technology made his mouth go dry. "I think," she said, her servant's mask finally slipping away to reveal something ancient and otherworldly. "It's time you knew the truth about your brother's death." Outside Jake's suburban home, the morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn. Neighbors walked their dogs and headed to work, oblivious to the fact that everything Jake Morrison thought he knew about his life was about to crumble like sand in his fingers. The crystal sphere pulsed once in Zeph's hands, then projected a holographic image that made Jake's knees nearly buckle. It showed Tommy, alive and fighting alongside creatures that looked like Zeph, defending what appeared to be an alien city from mechanical invaders. "Your brother," Zeph said softly, "died. A hero, but not in the way your government told you." Revelations in the living room. Jake stumbled backward until he hit the kitchen counter, his detective's mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The hologram showed his brother Tommy wielding weapons that belonged in science fiction movies, leading what appeared to be an alien resistance against chrome-plated mechanical warriors that moved with deadly precision. "This is impossible," Jake breathed, but even as he said it, pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed began clicking together. Tommy's mysterious deployment assignments, the way he'd started talking about bigger pictures and responsibilities beyond Earth in their last conversations, the strange burns on his hands that he'd claimed came from training exercises. Zeph moved to Jake's living room with fluid grace, settling onto his couch as if she belonged there, which Jake realized with growing unease she had for 6 months. 6 months of cleaning his house, preparing his meals, and learning everything about his life while he knew nothing about hers. "The hegemony found our world 18 months ago," she began, her voice taking on the cadence of someone recounting history rather than fiction. "Mechanical beings that consume organic matter to fuel their expansion across the galaxy. They gave us an ultimatum: surrender and become their servants, or be harvested for raw materials." The hologram shifted, showing massive ships descending on a world that looked like Earth might have if evolution had taken a different path. Cities of living crystal and metal rose from landscapes painted in impossible colors, while beings like Zeph tended to gardens that grew in geometric patterns. "We chose to fight," Zeph continued, "but our weapons were designed for defense, not warfare. We were losing until your government's secret contact protocols brought help from an unexpected source." Jake's legs felt weak. Tommy wasn't in a training accident. Thomas Morrison volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. He led a strike team of 12 humans to our world through a portal that had never been tested with organic matter. Half his team died in the transition. The others, including your brother, spent 8 months training our people in human warfare tactics. The detective in Jake noted how Zeph's story had the ring of truth, filling gaps in official timelines he'd memorized during his obsessive investigation into Tommy's death. The dates matched periods when his brother had been unreachable, when letters had stopped coming and video calls had been temporarily suspended due to operational security. "Show me how he died," Jake said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. The hologram shifted again, and Jake watched his brother's final moments with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Tommy stood on what appeared to be a crystalline bridge, holding off waves of mechanical attackers while civilians evacuated behind him. His face was grim but determined, every inch the hero Jake had always believed him to be. The end came quickly. An explosion, a collapsing structure, and Thomas Morrison disappearing beneath tons of alien architecture while saving hundreds of lives. He died as he'd lived, putting others before himself. But on a world trillions of miles from home, the portal collapsed after the final battle, Zeph explained as the hologram faded. "We were stranded on Earth with no way home and no way to contact our people. Your government gave us new identities and jobs in exchange for our silence about the war." Jake sank into his armchair, feeling decades older than he had an hour ago. "So you became domestic servants. We became observers, watchers, guardians of the families of those who died for our freedom." Her violet eyes met his with something that might have been compassion. "I chose to watch over you, Jake Morrison, because your brother spoke of you. Often during those final months, he said you were the best man he knew." The words should have been comforting, but instead they raised new questions that made Jake's investigative instinct scream warnings. "The price of truth. You've been watching me for 6 months, Jake said, his detective's mind finally catching up to the implications. "Learning my routines, my habits, my weaknesses. That's not protection, that's surveillance." Zeph's expression didn't change, but Jake caught the slight tensing of her shoulders that suggested he'd hit close to the mark. 6 months of perfectly prepared meals, flawlessly cleaned clothes, and a servant who never seemed to sleep or take breaks. He'd attributed it to good fortune and hiring help. Now it felt like something much more sinister. "Your brother made me promise to keep you safe," she said carefully. "From what?" Jake stood, pacing to the window where he could see his neighbor Mrs. Henderson walking her ancient beagle. Normal life continuing while his world rewrote itself. "The war's over, right? You won. The mechanical things are gone. The hegemony was defeated on our world," Zeph agreed. "But they're not gone from the galaxy. And now they know that Earth produces warriors capable of turning the tide of battles. They thought we're already won." The crystal sphere in her hands pulsed with soft light, projecting new images that made Jake's blood run cold. Massive ships, similar to the ones that had attacked Zeph's world, but bearing different markings. They moved through space with predatory purpose, leaving dead worlds in their wake. "They're coming here," Jake realized. 3 of their scout ships entered your solar system last week," Zeph confirmed. "They're studying human military capabilities, learning from their defeat on Kepler-7. This time, they won't underestimate your species." Jake's mind raced through the implications. If alien invaders were already in the solar system, why wasn't the government mobilizing? Why wasn't this the lead story on every news channel? "Because your leaders believe they can negotiate," Zeph said, apparently reading his thoughts. "They think the hegemony can be reasoned with, bought off with concessions or territory. They don't understand that mechanical consciousness doesn't comprehend concepts like mercy or coexistence. And you do. I watched them harvest entire cities on my world before your brother arrived. The hegemony doesn't negotiate, Detective Morrison. It consumes." Jake moved to his desk, pulling out the encrypted tablet he used for sensitive police work. If alien scouts were in the solar system, there should be traces in classified military communications, unusual astronomical observations, something that would confirm Zeph's story. What he found made his hands shake. Buried in police databases were reports from the past week that had been marked as routine atmospheric phenomena. UFO sightings, strange lights, electromagnetic disturbances that had been explained away or classified beyond his security clearance, but the pattern was there, hidden in plain sight. They're not just scouting, he said, looking up from the tablet. They're already here, Zeph nodded grimly. Infiltration units. Mechanical organisms designed to look human while they assess your defenses and identify key targets. Your brother's team, the survivors of the Kepler-7 mission, are at the top of their elimination list. How many survivors? 4. Including the team leader who goes by the codename Phantom. They're scattered across Earth, living under false identities, trying to prepare for what's coming. Jake closed the tablet, his detective's instincts warring with the impossibility of what he was hearing. Part of him wanted to arrest Zeph for fraud, delusion, or whatever crime-covered elaborate hoaxes involving advanced special effects. But the evidence was there, hidden in databases he had access to. Patterns that made sense once you knew what to look for. Why tell me this now? He asked. Why today? Because last night, the first infiltrator found Phantom's location, Zeph said quietly. The war your brother died fighting is about to begin again. And this time, Earth is the battlefield. The hunter becomes the hunt. Jake's coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed as Zeph's holographic display showed him surveillance footage. That shouldn't exist. The images were grainy, taken from what appeared to be military satellites, showing a suburban house in Denver exploding in a column of blue fire that reached toward the clouds. Phantom's safe house, Zeph explained, her voice carrying grief that seemed too human for someone he'd thought was just his housekeeper. David Chen was the best tactician your species ever produced. He survived 8 months of warfare against impossible odds, only to die in his own living room. Jake studied the footage with professional eyes, noting details that the official investigation would probably classify as gas explosion or terrorist attack, but the burn patterns were wrong. The debris scattered in ways that defied conventional explosives. This was alien technology at work. How do you know all this? He asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. Because we've been monitoring hegemony communications since the first scout ships arrived. Zeph replied, your government thinks they're being clever with their attempted diplomacy. They don't realize every message they send is being analyzed, every weakness cataloged for the final assault. She manipulated the crystal sphere, bringing up new images that made Jake's mouth go dry. Government officials he recognized from news broadcasts, sitting across negotiation tables from figures that looked perfectly human except for eyes that reflected light like mirrors. Infiltrators, Jake breathed. The hegemony learned from their defeat on Kepler-7. This time, they're not sending mechanical armies first. They're sending spies, assassins, and negotiators designed to weaken Earth from within before the main fleet arrives. Jake's police radio crackled to life, dispatch reporting. A suspicious death in his district. Male victim, mid-30s, apparent heart attack, but neighbors reported strange lights and sounds. The address made his blood freeze. It was 3 blocks from where another Kepler-7 survivor was supposed to be living under witness protection. That's number 2, Zeph said softly, apparently monitoring the same communications. Robert Singh, demolitions expert. The infiltrators are working faster than we anticipated. Jake stood, reaching for his service weapon out of habit. Just who exactly are we in this situation? The remaining members of my people who stayed on Earth, the surviving Kepler-7 veterans, and a handful of humans in your government who understand what's really happening. She rose as well, and for the first time since he'd known her, Jake realized how much taller she was than she'd appeared. We call ourselves the Remnant. And what does the Remnant want from me? Your brother made us promise to keep you alive. But keeping you safe means bringing you into a war you never asked to fight. Her violet eyes held steady on his face. The remaining survivors need protection, and the infiltrators need to be stopped before they eliminate everyone. Who knows how to fight the hegemony? Jake's radio crackled again. Another address. Another suspicious death. This time it was a woman, named Patricia Wells, who'd reportedly died in her sleep, though neighbors complained about electromagnetic interference that had knocked out power to the entire block. 3 down, Zeph said grimly. 1 left. Besides you. I'm not human, Detective Morrison. The infiltrators consider my people a secondary threat to be dealt with. After they've eliminated your species' best warriors, she moved toward his gun, safe with purposeful strides. But the last Kepler-7 survivor is someone you know. Jake's hands froze on his radio. What do you mean? Captain Michelle Torres, currently working as a trauma surgeon at General Hospital under the name Dr. Michelle Taylor. She saved your life 2 years ago when you were shot in that warehouse raid. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Dr. Taylor, the surgeon who'd worked 18 hours to save him after a drug bust had gone sideways. She'd visited him during recovery, talking about her military background and the importance of never giving up hope. He'd attributed her unusual knowledge of battlefield medicine to combat experience overseas. She's the last one, Zeph continued, and according to our intelligence, the infiltrators have already identified her location. Jake's radio erupted with emergency calls, multiple units responding to General Hospital, reports of explosion in the surgical wing, mass casualty event in progress. Through his window, he could see smoke rising on the horizon, black against the morning sky. We're too late, he whispered. No, Zeph said, and the crystal sphere in her hands began to glow with intense light. We're just in time to save her and end this before it gets worse. For the first time in 6 months, Jake's quiet housekeeper smiled, and the expression transformed her face into something predatory and dangerous. The battle for tomorrow's General Hospital parking lot looked like a war zone when Jake arrived, his police cruiser's sirens wailing through air thick with smoke and debris. Emergency vehicles surrounded the building's east wing, where the surgical department had been reduced to twisted metal and shattered glass. But what made his detectives' blood run cold wasn't the destruction, it was the way the first responders moved with mechanical precision, their eyes reflecting the flashing emergency lights. Like mirrors, infiltrators, Zeph said from the passenger seat, her servant's uniform replaced by form-fitting armor that seemed to grow from her skin. They're replacing the rescue workers as they arrive. Jake watched paramedics moving stretchers with inhuman strength, their faces blank of the stress and urgency that should mark a mass casualty event. When one of them turned toward their car, he saw no recognition in features that looked human until you noticed they never blinked. How many real people are left? He asked, chambering around in his service weapon. Unknown. But Dr. Torres is still alive. I can sense her life signature in the hospital's basement levels. Zeph's crystal sphere projected a three-dimensional map of the building, marking human heat signatures in blue and something else in cold red. The infiltrators are herding survivors toward the morgue. The tactical implications hit Jake immediately. Corner the targets, eliminate them where the bodies wouldn't be immediately discovered. Then replace key personnel throughout the hospital's emergency response network. It was efficient, ruthless, and exactly what he'd expect from mechanical intelligences that viewed humans as obstacles to be removed. What's the plan? He asked, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. We go in fast, extract Torres, and transmit her tactical knowledge to the remaining remnant cells before the main hegemony fleet arrives. Zeph's armor shifted color, adapting to match the emergency lighting. Your brother's final mission reports contained defensive strategies that could save your world, but only Torres knows how to implement them. They moved through the hospital's service entrance, avoiding the mechanically precise emergency responders in the main lobby. Jake's police training kicked in as they navigated corridors filled with real victims and fake rescue workers, his weapon ready while Zeph used some kind of scanner to distinguish between human and infiltrator. The basement morgue was a maze of sterile corridors and fluorescent lighting that cast harsh shadows on polished floors. Jake could hear voices ahead, Dr. Torres arguing with someone whose responses came in flat, emotionless tones that raised the hair on his neck. You cannot extract tactical information from a deceased subject, the mechanical voice was saying. Cooperation will ensure minimal discomfort during the neural skin process. Go to hell, came Torres's reply, and Jake felt a surge of pride for the woman who'd saved his life. They found her in the main morgue chamber, hands zip-tied behind her back while 3 infiltrators prepared equipment that looked like a cross. Between medical instruments and torture devices, Torres had a cut on her forehead and her surgical scrubs were torn. But her eyes blazed with the same defiance Jake remembered from his recovery room. The first infiltrator died before it realized they were there. Zeph's weapon, some kind of crystalline projectile system punching through its chest and shorting out the mechanical systems beneath synthetic skin. The second managed to turn before Jake put 3 rounds center mass, his police training overriding the strangeness of shooting something that looked human, but bled metallic fluid. The third infiltrator moved within human speed, crossing the room in seconds, but Torres had been working at her restraints. She rolled away from its reaching hands, kicking a metal tray into its path while Jake and Zeph coordinated their attack. "Behind you," Torres shouted, and Jake spun to see more infiltrators pouring through the doorway, their mirror eyes reflecting the morgue's harsh lighting. The battle lasted 3 minutes that felt like hours. Jake learned that infiltrators could absorb tremendous damage, but went down if you hit the right spots, while Zeph fought with fluid grace that made human martial arts look clumsy. Torres, freed from her restraints, proved she remembered her military training by using medical equipment as improvised weapons. When the last infiltrator fell, sparking and twitching on the morgue floor, Jake found himself breathing hard while Zeph barely seemed winded. "Is that all of them?" he asked. "In the hospital?" "Yes," Torres replied, checking her injuries with professional efficiency. "But there are more throughout the city, probably the entire country by now." "Then we'd better get moving," Zeph said, her crystal sphere projecting new tactical displays. "The main fleet will arrive within 72 hours, and we have a world to save." Jake looked at the 2 women, one who'd saved his life, one who'd been protecting it, and realized his quiet existence as a small-town detective was officially over. "All right," he said, holstering his weapon. "Let's go fight some aliens outside." Sirens wailed and smoke rose toward stars that might already be hiding an invasion fleet. But for the first time since Tommy's death, Jake Morrison felt like he was exactly where he belonged.